Hi, welcome to Chapter 6, Building Interpersonal Relationships. First, we need to discuss what exactly is interpersonal, or in our particular case, interpersonal communications. This is also commonly referred to as IPC. So, what is it? Well, IPC is the exchange of verbal and nonverbal symbols in order to initiate, develop, maintain, or terminate relationships. So as we see the first part, the exchange of verbal and nonverbal symbols. Okay, that's communication. We got that. And then we've got to initiate, develop, and maintain or terminate relationships. So IPC, interpersonal communications, is the notion of communications for the purpose of building or ending relationships. That's pretty straightforward and simple. Well, if you've got interpersonal, then you must have something opposite that, which would be impersonal. Impersonal is a didactic or multiple person communication situation that is designed to achieve an end. It is not designed to build a relationship or anything else. It's just the exchange of actual information, such as when you talk to a store clerk. When you go buy something, you're just literally exchanging how much the price of something is, maybe pleasantries about the weather, but generally speaking, it's very impersonal. Now, the book comes into talking about some of this and brings up this thing from William Schultz called Fear OB. They spend an inordinate amount of time in the chapter discussing Fear OB. And when I say this is what I mean. It is F-I-R-O-B. Now, what I didn't like about the book, and what I didn't like the way they had done this, is that we spent probably 2 or 3 paragraphs talking about this before they ever bothered to tell us what Fear OB means. Fear OB is fundamental interpersonal relationships orientation behavior. It's a theory that's understands the basic IPC needs. This theory lays out there's 3 basic needs. And I'll write these down for you. It's inclusion, control, and openness. All right. Inclusion is a need to feel belong. Control is a need to have influence over your own life. And openness is a need for emotional connection. Now, each of us have these to varying degrees and covers that. Let's start with inclusion. When we talk about inclusion, we start talking about introvert versus extrovert. Some people have a good idea of what these are, or they think they do. Some not so much. But let's look at what the difference is. But more to the point, let's look at some of the differences that can be found in an introvert and an extrovert. And the easiest way to do that is to look at their styles of communication or their behaviors. All right. So behavior of an introvert versus behavior of the extrovert. An introvert waits to be spoken to, avoids self-disclosure. They're the kind of person that stays in the back corner and waits till somebody calls on them and then really doesn't want to answer much if they have to. An extrovert is the initiates conversation and discloses about themselves. The extreme extrovert, as we know, is that person that will come up there and tell you their entire life history even though you didn't ask them a damn thing. All right. Then we have the introverts prefer small groups, quiet environments. We're more of a didactic or a triad functioning people. We like 2 to 3 people in our group. We're like that. Whereas extroverts enjoy crowds and noisy environments. These are the people that really enjoy going to clubs and parties and hanging out with tens and hundreds of people. Again, introverts enjoy being alone. They're the people that really gain strength from within. They are the ones that don't need a bunch of stuff. They're good with a book and maybe some music in the background and frozen pizza in the oven, and that's good. Whereas extroverts really like being around people. Again, they want to go to clubs. They want to go hang out at parties. They like to hang out with bunches of friends at a time, not just 1 or 2. Introverts ask questions only when they're interested, whereas extroverts ask questions to show interest in others. Now that too kind of seems the same. Introverts ask questions only when really interested. So when you start talking about politics or science or religion or something, and the introvert starts asking questions, that's because they're interested in what you're saying. The extrovert, on the other hand, will ask questions about the person to find out more about them, to show that they're interested in them. Now, back to the questioning. Introverts answer questions in brief, token manner. They don't go in detail. They don't go in depth. They're the kind that grunt, just say little minor things, whereas the extrovert is more willing to just expound on everything. They will just talk for hours if you let them. Introverts use less mutual sustained eye contact and use muted facial and vocal expressions. Again, this is that quiet, shoulders humped down, eyes averted, looking down kind of talking person, and the extrovert's the one that stands up with their shoulders back, meets person's eye contact, sticks their hands out, shakes their hands out vigorously, that kind of person. Those are the biggest differences between there. I mean, there's a whole lot of various information here. I think on the bottom, experience here, the last one they said, introverts experience fairly high speech anxiety, where extroverts experience fairly low speech anxiety. This is probably true to some degree, but I've also noticed that a lot of people that tend to be extroverted or appear to be extroverted still have speech anxieties. I'm not entirely sure your degree of openness or your degree of inclusion necessarily dictates your anxiety levels. Now, while we're talking about the degree of enclosure, let's look at this at a sliding scale. If on the low end of inclusion needs, someone who doesn't need to feel included a lot is the introvert, and on the high end is the extrovert, in between is where most of us land. We are ambiverts. And that is, in some situations we're introverted, some situations we're extroverted. It's more or less that's where most of us would really land. All right, so we've talked about introverts, we've talked about extroverts, we talked about inclusion and control. Now let's see what else we can talk about while we're discussing this. And that's the idea of control. We've seen the idea of inclusion. Let's look at control. Control is the extreme extrovert. In the extremes, the extrovert that is an autocrat, the one that likes to do everything out there. The introvert is the abdicrat, the one that wants to let everybody do things for them. Extrovert is more dominant often, or people that need to be more in control are more dominant. Then you have submissives that needs to be controlled. All these levels adjust to how things are in you as an individual, or how you develop your interpersonal situations. One of the other things we want to talk about, though, is the idea of power difference. Power difference is the idea that, or power distance rather. Power distance is the notion that somebody has power set up somewhere up here. We've got power, the president, the vice president, things like that. These people are power. The aristocracy or the elite or the rich, they have a power. The poor, the lower class have less power. This is true in that they have those powers. The difference in high distance and low distance countries, or people that believe in power distances, necessarily believe that those positions have power, or those people have power, and rightfully so, and therefore they are better or more advanced or more something than everybody else. In lower power distance countries like the United States, we find that everybody is equal, generally speaking. I mean, you have some offsets. Many people feel like, well, that person's a little higher than this person's a little higher than this person. But overall, we are all still people. On the playing field, we all should be level, equal people. Now, obviously, you have situations like in India that had the caste system, where if you're born into this level, you're in that level, and those people in the other side, the aristocracy, those are well above you, and they will always be above you. Now, one of the next things is openness. You know, we talked about inclusion and control. Now, the last one on 4B is openness. And that's the amount of disclosure you have. And or withholdings on the back side of that. The more you disclose, the more open you feel. Let me find some notes here. Sorry. And this is a range thing again. I want to be down here. Come here. I want to be down here. Put me down here. All right. So range of openness. If you are a low openness kind of person, you're the one that needs to be the introvert, the enclosed person, the withholder. I don't share my personal data type person. You are low. You are a withholder. If you're the person that walks up and just tells you your entire life history, every drug you've ever done, every sexual partner and position you've ever been in, any of those things, that is a high disclosure. Now, this runs the gamut. Everybody, again, we fall in between, whether you're withholder or disclosure. Everything's a little different depending on who you're with. But as you expand this, and as you become more open and more willing to share, or more openness needs, that develops different things that come into play. Now, one of these things, notion is called communication privacy management theory, which we will go into a little bit later, but it's the whole notion of you're sharing information versus not sharing information. And I've got a big old thing on notes on here, but I think we're going to hold off on that, cover it at a later time. All right. So now, as you can see, I'm following the book along. I'm just going to slide up here just because it's here. And that's contradictory needs. And I'm going to read these just because it makes sense. It's easier. Sometimes we want to be alone. Sometimes we prefer others take control. Sometimes we prefer to withhold disclosures, etc. It's called contradictory needs. This is, here, I like this line. It says, I want to be known as we, but I need to be me. That's dialectical tension. Sorry. Basically, the whole notion is that not all your needs are compatible. You can be that introvert, that person that needs to be enclosed, does not feel the need to include. Yet you need to reach out and be with people, but you can't be with people unless you go out and be with people. And then that kind of gets into, and that causes issues. And again, this is not something that doesn't exist in all of us. We all have some kind of situation. Sorry. We all have some kind of these issues, and it's just something we have to work through. Now, there's a notion called, or a theory out there called social exchange theory. The book spends as much room. I mean, literally like 2 paragraphs at best on social exchange theory. This is a theory that can actually cover an entire dissertation. Somebody's entire doctoral work is based on social exchange theory. Now I'm going to stem this down to, reduce this down to like the very nominal amount, to the very most squished idea there is, and that is that social exchange theory plays on the notion that we will kind of do a cost-benefit analysis of our relationships, and as long as the benefit exceeds the cost, we'll continue with those relationships. Whereas when the benefit, where the cost exceeds the benefits, that's when we're more inclined to terminate the relationships. Now, one of the things I want to point out to this, and this is the whole notion here in social exchange theory, is that we are, this has the idea that we are these mechanical beings that do like I said, that cost-benefit analysis constantly. And that's not necessarily the case. Because if you take the situation of domestic violence, many people are being abused. And I mean, both emotionally, physically abused, and yet they stay in these relationships where it is complete cost, nominal benefit at best, but yet they stay. So that throws that set theory out the window. So, as I said, and that's based on perception. Sometimes, though, people perceive that differently, and that's what happens. In a domestic violence situation, they perceive that they need this person, they need the relationship. They can't sustain without that relationship, without their financial support or the support for their children or whatever the issue is. Their perception is such that they need to stay in that situation. And perception is always reality. Doesn't matter. what you perceive in your head, what you perceive, what they perceive, that is real to them. Doesn't matter that you can sit there and explain things 15 ways to Sunday of how it's detrimental to their well-being. Their perception is this. That's the case. So although social exchange theory kind of works out, it kind of doesn't. All of us have an balance. We all have our cost of what we consider cost to benefit ratio. There is no set rule that says you spend $1, you earn $1. This is you do things for people, people do things for you, you all benefit somehow. That's the idea of social exchange theory. Now, one of the next things I talk about is uncertainty reduction theory. This is pretty self-explanatory. Uncertainty reduction theory, the whole notion that as you reduce your uncertainty with the person, your comfort level with that person increases. It can also be inversely proportional as well, in that the more you learn about somebody, the less you want to be around that person. The whole point, though, in uncertainty reduction theory is the idea that through disclosures, you tend to reduce or build your relationship. Now, there are 3 strategies for uncertainty reduction theory. Let me go over these real quick. You have passive. Hold on, let me get my book here. Let me get this over here for you. Okay, let's swap me back to here. All right, so we're looking at URT, uncertainty reduction theory. And then here's the notion that as uncertainty drops, liking increases. That's the idea. As your uncertainty goes down, your liking increases. Or your disliking may increase, but it's still liking. It's just one's got a prefix on there. All right, the next thing, but there are 3 basic areas. That's passive, and that's observations. And that's the idea is that I watch and I see and I become more familiar with you as a person as I watch through what it is. Then you have active, which is solicitation from others. Let me write that down. Sorry. You have passive. And you have active. So passive is observation. Sorry, my writing is not that great, but passive is observation. That is the idea that, sorry, I need to edit this. Can't find what I'm looking for. Okay, oh well. I was trying to reduce brightness. All right, so passive is observations. Active is solicitation from others. That means that I'm going to ask you about this person. I want to know, oh, so what's the deal with that guy over there? What's up with that? That's the kind of thing. That's active. And then you have interactive. And that's pretty much straightforward. It's direct engagement. That is, you're talking directly to that person. You're engaging that conversation. You're asking questions. You're exchanging data. You're disclosing information, and you're building this relationship. That's the idea of uncertainty reduction theory. And it's a good theory. It may not be the best theory in the world, but it pretty much stands to reason on those. Now, some of the things we have is talking about effective communication, and when we got into the interactive and engaging in conversation, one of the things we need to talk about is the idea of self-disclosure. When you're in those conversations, you are disclosing some information about you. In theory. We hope you are anyway. Sorry, let me do this. Throw me over here on this side. Okay, this is also from your book, page 169. As you disclose, you look at number 1, superficial exchange. This is that whole idea of impersonal communication. The conversation that's going on outside of your realm of personal disclosure. You're not telling about your grandmother who's in hospice. You're not discussing your history or anything else. This is how's the weather, how those things. Well, as you increase the depth of disclosure, self-disclosure, as you can see, you got the breadth of self-disclosure. It's a big, wide circle. You can see this great, big, wide circle out here. So as you increase the breadth, as you increase the depth, that means the deeper the information, the more private, personal data you exchange with this person, the lower, the smaller the breadth. The depth increases, the depth decreases. Kind of like the idea of shallow waters or still waters run deep. The notion of a wide, shallow current carries as much water as a narrow, deep channel. As you increase your depth of disclosure, as you get more information, you decrease the breadth and you increase less people that are actually getting in there. Layer 2 here is exploratory exchange. This is where we're just kind of probing, kind of getting ideas from people of how old are you again? And where'd you grow up at? And things like this. Those kind of information, trying to draw out some data from these people without getting too in depth, and also providing a little more data from yourself. One of the things I haven't talked about and I want to discuss, and that's the idea of reciprocity. Reciprocity is the exchange of information. It is a two-way street. It is reciprocal in nature. It means that give and take. I give, you take, you give, I take. It goes back and forth. For this depth of self-disclosure, it has to go back and forth. It also has to move down this depth at a fairly equal rate. If one person goes from, oh, hi, how are you? My name's Fred. By the way, I killed somebody last week. And the other person is still up there on superficial exchange, they're going to run. Now, if, however, you're in your best friend's relationship, you've known this person since elementary school, and you're all running around bouncing back and forth here at significant exchange and intimate exchange, all that information is there and you're back and forth at that point, then when you all say, oh yeah, by the way, I killed somebody last week. Yeah, where we're hiding the body at. So it has to be reciprocal. And as you go and as you work your way down from superficial to exploratory to significant to intimate exchange, as you work your way down there, your breadth narrows, but your depth increases. And that's the whole idea of that. What it actually does is it means that you become more entwined with the individual. They know more about you, sometimes maybe more than you want them to know, but that's part of life. That's what we want. We want those people that we can be fully open with. We hope it's our spouses, significant others, boyfriend, girlfriend, things like that. Moms and dads tend to be a little less. Siblings are a little more than moms and dads, but it's there. Okay, so now back to conversations. As we talked about, we've moved our way down. And some of the things that have to exist, and that's in those, and the contribution must have quality. When you're in a conversation, what you say must have quality. It has to be truthful or something. It cannot be just out and out lies, because that does not make effective communication or conversations. There must be quantity. You must have enough information. Now let's back up here. We've talked about this a couple times. Let's look at the Trump campaigns. It doesn't have any quality because it's not really that truthful. And it doesn't have any quantity. It doesn't really have any information. Now, so we can't really say his or conversation. His are just stating his whatevers. In a normal conversation, you have to talk. You have to release a certain amount of data. You have to be willing to talk to people and say, this is the case. This is truthful. This isn't truthful. It doesn't mean that I'm telling you my life history. It just means that I am covering information and telling you truthfully what I feel or believe or what I think. I give you enough information to actually be able to respond to it. If all I do is say 3 words, that's not really a conversation. It has to be relevant. You can't randomly throw a statement out there in the middle of a conversation and expect it to build on the conversation. It just doesn't work. It has to be relevant to the conversation in order to be conversational. It also has to be a manner which is in some kind of manner that's clear and organized. As we've said early on in the chat in the semester, effective communications and communications in general, language has rules. We speak the way we speak in order to convey the information that we expect. Each language is a little different. French, Spanish syntax is different than English syntax, whereas the adjective that describes the noun comes in our language comes before the noun. In Spanish, it comes after the noun. So the red apple is manzana rojas. Roja. My Spanish sucks. Anyway, that's the whole idea of it. So when you do good conversations, you got to be honest. You have to be truthful enough. It has to be relevant, and it has to have some kind of structure. All right. So, openers to good conversation. Sorry, I'm just looking over some notes. Open to some of the good conversations is that, it's honest compliment. Nice dress. It's not something corny like your eyes are like limpid pools of whatever. Seriously, some honest compliment is a good opener for conversation. Reference to current events, something local in time or something, a sporting event that's going on, elections at the moment. Anything that's going on at the moment in the area, that is a good conversational opener, or a current topic, some situation that's going on. Those are some good openers for conversations. Now, when we start talking about this, and we talk about self-disclosure, and we've talked about this a little bit, and we'll cover it just a little bit more here, and that's the idea that you're releasing information. You're disclosing something of yourself to the other people. Now, different societies, cultures are different. Some cultures are more open than others. Cultures like the United States, we're very open in self-disclosure. We just look at all of our reality TV, look at the Kardashians. We want to know everything that's going on out there. Heck, even Kim Kardashian recently posted nude pictures of her on either Instagram or Twitter, I'm not sure which, some social media. But, we will disclose anything about anybody. Then you have closed areas like the East Asian countries like Japan and China that they don't tell you anything. They're very tight-lipped. That's information that does not go out. You have genders. Women are more open than men. Women are more willing to share their feelings and their emotions and disclose data. Men are more like, ugh, food. Things like that. Now, technology can also be used to reduce uncertainty online. Sometimes that's the idea that we'll disclose more information as we go because we hide behind the anonymity or the apparent anonymity of a screen between us. Now, one of the things we start talking about is politeness theory. While we're talking about self-disclosure, we'll go into politeness theory here in just a minute, and then we're going to wrap it up. And that's the idea that you're saving face. You've heard the idea, especially in East Asian countries where you have, it's face saving or saving face. Well, face saving is nationwide. It's worldwide. It is human nature. We like to either project, the face that we project is that of what we want people to see, and then we have the one that people see us. That's our self-image or what we want, or our desired self-image. We have a positive face, which is the need to be liked or appreciated and desired. We have negative face, which is the desire to act freely without constraints. So I have this whole notion that I want to be accepted by people. I want people to listen to me. I want them to understand. But I also have the idea that I want to be me. So I want to do whatever I want. So a lot of these things come in situations. Then we have the two things on this side. That's preventative face work and restorative face work. They're pretty much straightforward. Preventative face work, I'm going to do what I can to prevent causing face-taking actions. I don't want to do something that's going to make people see me in a bad light or make somebody else see somebody else in a bad light. And then there's restorative face work, is that, oh, I've already screwed up and now I'm trying to rebuild my face. I'm really trying to rebuild my rep. But both don't, and now I want you to remember, this doesn't apply just to the sender. This is not just me restoring my face or preventing my face from being disrupted. It is also restoring or preventing face of the other party. So again, these are all various things that cover what we talked about in this. We've talked about self-disclosure. We've talked about all these other things. We've discussed much of the other things. And I think that's about as far as we need to talk about today. So that covers our interpersonal communication and building relationships. We will spend much more time in class talking about a lot of this information. And thank you for listening, and I hope you have a good day.